At this very moment, the balance of power is shifting. Ukraine is forming a new defense alliance. Medvedev has absolutely lost it over this, while Kremlin statements and threats to Europe. Russia's intimidation button has started to malfunction. Sabotaging their own rear? Shocking. Fedorov brought something incredible for Ukraine from Ramstein. Our military has turned into a horde of terminators. The enemy's knees are buckling before the fighting even starts. You have to see this. Lukashenko has mobilized his soldiers. A new war? Moscow is stressed, while Kyiv puts a clever plan on the table. It looks like Batka will fall for it. The trap has already been set. Total shock. The Leningrad region has turned into the front line. A drone knockout by our forces and a bitter aftertaste for Russia. The hell of revenge has been ignited. A devil in the sea. Our submarine has shaken the world. Ukraine has created a weapon of victory. Moscow, get ready. All this and more in our episode Hell Point. This is a true sensation. Putin is in a panic because of Volodymyr Zelensky. Medvedev nearly choked on his own rage during a live broadcast. Moscow is so rattled it's preparing strikes against NATO. The list of targets has already been announced. Everything is being decided right now. However, instead of fear, the West read a telling signal straight from the Kremlin's offices. Russia is finally at a breaking point. Air defense is not working. Ukrainian drones have surpassed Russia's and there's no more room for maneuver. How did the Russian Federation set itself up and leak what intelligence had long awaited? Let's take a look. The Putin regime is once again resorting to the language of direct threats.
This is a symptom of the impending strategic defeat of the Russian regime.
And they are doing it so openly for the first time. The perpetually drunk deputy chairman of the Russian Security Council, Medvedev, threatened European countries with strikes on their territory.
When the possibility of a strike becomes a reality will depend on how the situation develops. Sweet dreams, European partners.
These statements were made following the Russian Ministry of Defense's publication of a list of enterprises in European countries that Moscow claims are involved in producing drones and military equipment for Ukraine.
A significant increase in the production of UAVs for the Kiev regime is planned through expanded funding for Ukrainian and joint ventures located in European countries that produce strike drones and their components.
The list includes 11 branches, including facilities in Great Britain, Latvia, Lithuania, the Netherlands, Poland and the Czech Republic, as well as in Germany, Spain, Italy, Israel and Turkey.
We view this decision as a deliberate step leading to a sharp escalation of the military-political situation across the European continent and the gradual transformation of these countries into Ukraine's strategic rear.
Essentially, this is no longer just a warning, it's a public marking of objects that Moscow effectively links to potential strikes.
Russia is rapidly running out of air defense systems. Last month, based on video evidence alone, the Russian regime lost 41 units, including radars, surface-to-air missile systems, and so on. This month, it's losing about 1 unit per day. Before that, 54 units were lost over 3 consecutive months. The air defense crisis is only just beginning.
Against this backdrop, Medvedev's rhetoric looks less and less like a show of strength and more like fear. The fear of a system trying to mask its own vulnerability with threats and harsh language.
At the same time, Ukrainians are getting more and more drones and missiles, but especially unmanned aerial vehicles. Moreover, the quality of these drones has clearly improved and their range hasn't decreased. In fact, it's increased once again. Even a year ago, precision had reached a level of meter-for-meter accuracy. And since then, as you can imagine, these systems haven't performed any worse. On the contrary, they've started working even better.
And that's why every new round of such statements sounds not like an expansion of influence, but like a signal of an approaching internal fiasco that the Kremlin is trying to hide by any means.
The statements from the Russian Ministry of Defense should be taken quite literally. The publication of production sites for drones and other military equipment in Europe is a registry of potential legitimate targets for the Russian armed forces.
And another step toward escalation. The Russian State Duma has approved the so-called protection of Russians abroad. A bill has been passed in its first reading that allows the Russian leadership to use the armed forces outside of Russia, supposedly to protect citizens facing judicial prosecution. Formally, it concerns Russians arrested or prosecuted by decisions of foreign courts and international bodies in whose work Russia does not participate. One key feature is the extremely broad wording, with no clear restrictions on the use of force. Essentially, a mechanism is being created where foreign court decisions can be interpreted as a pretext for a foreign policy and potential military response.
Russia is demonstrating that it's losing ground in this war, generally speaking, on all levels. On the front lines, where the Russian offensive, as the publication Die Welt writes, for example, has stalled. In the rear, if we're talking about the mid-rear areas, which are burning like they've never burned before. And of course, deep within Russian territory, where literally, as I've already said, entire clusters are sometimes burned in a single night. Entire clusters of the Russian military-industrial complex.
And the more and louder the threatening statements sound in Russia, the more obvious the main thing becomes: the end is near. And so Ukraine, together with its Western partners, is on the right path.
What a piece of news. Fedorov stunned Ukrainians. In the Russian Federation, they went quiet when they heard this. A war of robots and technology. Drone assault units moved in sharply and have already made the enemy tremble. The Russians now have zero chance of gaining the upper hand. The world is delighted with Fedorov's approach. Ukraine has built an air defense system that no one has ever seen before. Our people hit the jackpot. The Minister of Defense is bringing back something incredible from Ramstein, the largest drone contract in Europe. First details coming up.
Putin's occupiers are in the crosshairs. A new model of warfare is being introduced in Ukraine. It's about the creation of drone assault units. The new model combines aerial and ground drones with infantry into a single system, which allows for minimizing personnel losses and increasing the accuracy of strikes.
Well, as of today, I simply see a logical, fairly predictable development of assault units into something that will change the face of future infantry worldwide, not just in Ukraine, well, at least until the end of this century, because the infantryman and the unmanned systems that accompany him, reconnaissance surveillance systems, ground robotic complexes, as well as strike weapons. This is an integral part of infantry today. And this will be integrated specifically into assault units.
It is planned that this experience will be scaled to all key areas of the front, finally securing the advantage of unmanned systems in the strategy of modern warfare. According to the Ministry of Defense, the use of the latest units has already demonstrated concrete successes in southern Ukraine.
At that moment, the suppression of Russian positions was carried out in a combined manner, both with the help of the drone component and assault units. You could say it was a kind of testing of our capabilities, and it showed results. We not only stopped the Russian advance in the Hulyapol direction along the right bank of the Haichu River, as well as in the Volcha-Vorona interflow, which is already in the Dnipropetrovsk region, but also forced the Russians to go to the left bank of the Haichu River to pull back, leave their positions and retreat.
According to the Minister of Defense Mykhailo Fedorov, every meter of Ukrainian land cost the occupiers a price of huge human casualties. The introduction of drone assault units, which combine unmanned systems with infantry, will allow for much more effective combat against the Russian invaders.
Mykhailo Fedorov is a person who is technically very well, having a very good technical base, technically well informed about what is happening in the troops and what the troops need. Fresh blood has finally entered the Ministry of Defense, not some outdated, senile pension age or temporary, that is, the blood of a temporary worker. This is about a specific change from within the very concept of the Ministry of Defense and its approach to further decision-making on how Ukraine should win this war.
Although Mykhailo Fedorov has only been in the position of Minister of Defense since January, he is actively implementing a technological approach to warfare. On April 15th, at a Ramstein format meeting, Fedorov noted that Ukraine's air defense has significantly strengthened. The interception rate for cruise missiles is 80%. The drone interception rate has exceeded 90%. And this is despite a very difficult winter, when the Russian Federation tried to destroy the Ukrainian energy sector.
On the night of April 15th to 16th, we even witnessed firsthand how our air defense systems effectively handled almost all of the targets. The short-range air defense units managed to shoot down the maximum possible number of enemy drones. Medium-range air defense, including our aviation, F-16 fighters, and MiG-29, shot down KH-101 missiles, and 19 out of 20 missiles were shot down. That is practically an absolute indicator of efficiency, but we still have problems with ballistics.
The Ukraine Defense Contact Group during the Ramstein meeting agreed on support for the country's air defense and the supply of missiles for Patriot systems. Additionally, Germany is investing $4 billion in strengthening air defense. Great Britain is providing the largest support package in the field of drones this year. Estonia is joining the strengthening of air defense under the PURL program.
This is primarily a strengthening of the capabilities of the Ukrainian Defense Forces in conducting both counteroffensive operations and, accordingly, so-called active defense. And there was a very notable statement made by the head of NATO, who said that the side will be receiving military support from our European partners in the amount of approximately 60 billion euros.
Protecting the Ukrainian sky has become not just a security issue, but a powerful impulse for the development of the military-industrial complex and communication with European partners.
Not just at the level of supply us with Patriot system launchers, supply us with anti-aircraft guided missiles of the PACM-3 type for the Patriot air defense system, but also let's communicate at the level of creating our own air defense system, inexpensive, cheap, but high-tech and functional in matters of intercepting ballistic missiles.
According to Bloomberg, Ukraine has already become one of Europe's largest sites for combat testing of drones. New solutions are tested right on the battlefield, and successful designs are immediately launched into large-scale production.
Urgent. Belarus is once again at the center of tension. Rumors are spreading faster than official comments. The intrigue grows by the hour. Lukashenko announces preparations for war. Has Batka really planned something without Moscow's approval? Bold moves behind the scenes. Kyiv is carefully keeping its finger on the pulse, biding its time and preparing to bring its player onto the geopolitical chessboard. Ukraine is starting a coup in Minsk. The explosion will be so powerful that those in the Kremlin won't be able to sit still in their chairs. The first details are next.
Ukraine is changing its strategy regarding Belarus. Now Kyiv will not wait for the situation in Minsk to change on its own and is starting to act.
We need to mobilize now to survive this difficult time, and an uncertain time at that. As president, I don't know what to prepare you for.
It's worth noting that Ukraine does not intend to directly interfere in the politics of the neighboring state. However, it will show its interest in Belarus ceasing to be Moscow's doormat much more actively. A clear sign of this was the meeting between Zelensky and Belarusian oppositionist Sviatlana Tsikhanouskaya, as well as the appointment of a representative for Belarus in Ukraine.
With Ukraine, we have a huge number of topics. This is the information struggle against Russian propaganda. This is aid to Belarusian volunteers who are now defending Ukraine. This is countering Lukashenko's provocations, among other things. We have a huge amount of information from inside Belarus about the Russian military presence, Oreshnik's nuclear weapons, and we will share this information, intelligence or secret.
Moreover, Europe also intends to deal with the Belarusian issue more actively. First of all, experts explain, Lukashenko's actions and rhetoric create real threats to the EU.
There really can be no peaceful time, Pavel, not now. We are preparing for war.
The deployment of the Oreshnik, the transfer of the RF army, the construction of new military facilities, these are just the obvious paths of escalation that Minsk is pursuing today. The threat is also growing for Ukraine.
In Belarus, military special installations are being created for launching drones, Russian drones over the territory of Ukraine, so that the range and Durat range would be reduced, as well as the flight duration.
In addition, according to intelligence from the RF, Putin wants to create a buffer zone around Ukraine not only in the east but also in the north. And this means that an invasion from Belarus could happen again.
In order to organize a buffer zone, it is necessary to do several things. For Putin, first, relatively speaking, this first option is to directly send Russian troops to the territory of Belarus. Then use Russian troops to enter the territory of Ukraine, that is to use once again Belarus as a bridgehead against the Ukrainian state, just as it was at the start of the full-scale invasion.
Realizing that Putin might drag him into the war at any moment, the mustachioed one even started a military review. All for one purpose: to declare his own army not ready for combat.
It was covered, as most of you might have wanted, because all the filth that exists in our army, and there is plenty of it, well, we wouldn't want to show it, especially to our potential opponents, and maybe even enemies.
At the same time, although Lukashenko avoided direct military aid to Moscow, today cooperation with the Russian Federation is gaining momentum. By the end of last year, nearly 300 enterprises were working for the Russian defense industry. Minsk also approved many logistical routes that operate against Ukraine. In part, the mustachioed cartographer did this simply to stay in office.
Lukashenko is in a bit of a bind right now, you see. It's clear that he's on edge. It's clear he's panicking and doesn't know which way from which side to expect a blow, right? And the internal situation among the population is sort of static, but it's tense.
Both Kyiv and Europe decided to take advantage of this, mainly through contacts with the opposition, which is increasing its network and influence inside Belarus.
After all, Lukashenko is getting older. Lukashenko has no support base in Belarus. Society does not support the war or integration with Russia. We feel and see this, including through the repressions, because every day people are detained for anti-war or anti-Lukashenko protests or even online activity. And all of this could create a new situation for which we must be prepared. Whether it will be internal, some movement within the system itself, or perhaps something related to the streets. We can't predict exactly which scenarios will unfold because everything depends on the geopolitical situation.
As for Lukashenko, he also understands everything. A regime that for the last 5 years has relied solely on Putin's bayonets cannot exist indefinitely. And all that remains for the mustachioed one today is to visit factories and fish farms as befits a supply manager.
This shows once again that he is in a very difficult psychological position. He is indeed preparing for the worst-case scenarios. He is responsible for these worst-case scenarios because he made Belarus dependent on the aggressor country. He has brought our country's economy to a deplorable state.
And most importantly, he has put himself in the same position. Because the vice from Russia and the EU is tightening and could suddenly crush the dictator who has sat on his throne the longest in Europe.
Urgent secret strikes by Ukrainian drones have broken the backbone of the RF. The Leningrad region is now the front line. Everything changed in an instant. Even the most loyal Russian officials are not ready to tolerate this. A massive defeat, the likes of which the world has never seen, was finally shown. Factories blew up, Operation Leaky Air Defense, and on top of that, another self-destruction. Russians are screaming, emergency evacuation. Cities are burning with the fire of our fury. In the Kremlin, they are preparing for the worst. More on all this next. Watch until the end.
What's that? Did it explode? The windows were blown out.
Russia's Black Sea coast was hosting guests once again. Fierce Ukrainian drones, residents of the town of Tuapse, recorded dozens of explosions over the city and were the first to report that the local oil refinery is on fire. The moment of impact and the subsequent fire were visible even from space. So in the morning, vacationers were greeted by incredible views.
Oh my God, I wouldn't come out of there. They hit the factory. Everything is burning there.
And although the local governor preferred to remain silent about the attack on the plant, OSINT analysts identified the fire hotspots in Tuapse.
OSINT analyst Astra, based on video filmed by an eyewitness, identified at least 3 fire hotspots in Tuapse. 2 of them are located on the territory of the Tuapse oil refinery, NPZ, and 1 is in the sea near the shore. Fuel tanks are burning at the NPZ. It is not possible to determine what exactly is burning in the sea from this video, noted OSINT analyst Astra. Fires in Tuapse are also recorded by the NASA firm's temperature anomaly tracking service. But signatures on the map can be shifted and do not always reflect the correct location with meter precision.
A state of emergency was introduced in the region, and given that the fire only intensified during the day, people in Tuapse will have to observe the apocalyptic scene and breathe oil product fumes for more than 1 day.
There it's burning. 2 spots are burning. Yes, 2 spots are burning.
so it's better to wait with a vacation in the Krasnodar region. Recovering in a region where one of Russia's largest oil refineries is located is not the best idea. By the way, this plant is important for export. Every year, about 12 million tons of oil are processed here. 90% of the products, petroleum distillates, fuel oil, diesel fuel, and aviation gas are sold abroad. The oil refinery in the Krasnodar region is the second major target of Ukrainian drones in a single day. Yesterday, Fury reached Bashkortostan, and that is, for a moment, 1,500 kilometers away.
The plant is the SNKH-ZIT. 3 drones hit it. Look at all that smoke. That's it, everyone go home.
The Stoletamak oil refinery has been attacked by drones before. It's a legitimate military target for the Ukrainian military as it produces fuel for the occupiers' aviation.
It produces a wide range of various chemical products, including, if I understand correctly, aviation fuel. And importantly, this is the specific nature of this enterprise. It produces various types of additives. And therefore, it shut down, yet another shutdown for, I don't know for how long, for several weeks probably, but in general, this is a reduction in the combat potential of the Russian army. Well, if there just happens to not be enough lubricating oil available in some direction, then a tank brigade, well, it comes to a stop. So it stops fighting and waits until this vital oil is finally delivered to it.
Russian enterprises, thanks to which the Russian army continued its aggression, also self-destructed. At least that's what the local authorities claim. A technological bang was heard at the Kazan gunpowder plant, where an entire production facility was destroyed. An explosion was also heard at the gunpowder plant in Samara. The action in Russia is gaining momentum every day. Officials no longer hide this in their public reports. Thus, the governor of the Leningrad region, Drozdenko, stated his region is not just a border region, but a frontline one.
We are a region that borders foreign countries today, both by land and by sea. And today our region has the longest border with the unfriendly NATO bloc, with the countries of the unfriendly NATO bloc. But recently our region has become not only a border region, but also a frontline one. This is evidenced by just one figure that I will now announce. I received it just the other day. Based on the results of the first quarter of 2026, 243 unmanned aerial vehicles of a hostile country were shot down in the sky over the Leningrad region.
If St. Petersburg and the region are a frontline region, then what can be said about the Belgorod region, and even more so about the territories of Ukraine occupied by Russia, which the invaders have turned into military bases and warehouses? In just one day, the defense forces carried out a series of successful strikes, destroying the aggressors' logistics. This submarine has captured the attention of the entire world. New Ukrainian technologies in weaponry are reaching a different level.
The Kremlin did not expect such a turn of events. The maritime front is getting more tense and the balance of power is fragile. New borders and zones of influence. The moment of truth is approaching. The first orders have already been given. What will happen next? Don't miss it.
It is impossible to see and almost impossible to detect. If it locks onto a target, there is no time left to react. Ukrainian developers have presented what until recently seemed impossible. The Kronos underwater stealth craft can operate covertly, autonomously, and strike where the enemy least expects it.
These are, well, masterpieces, especially when it comes to reconnaissance and sabotage operations, or strike-capable guided and unguided drones.
Kronos is not a classic submarine or just a drone, but a hybrid platform that combines several functions, from covert reconnaissance to full-scale strike operations. The submarine can reach up to 50 kilometers per hour underwater and up to 80 on the surface, dive to a depth of 100 meters normally, and withstand critical loads of up to 250. But the key feature is not speed or even depth, but its low visibility.
And not just for radars, but also for echo sounders and for sonars for marine radars. Because the boat's hull is made of composites meaning it's non-metallic.
So we're not just talking about technology, but a new level of warfare where the enemy might not even realize where the strike came from. At the same time, Kronos is not only about stealth but also about power. The craft is equipped with 6 torpedoes and can hit targets at a distance of up to 3 kilometers, turning the compact platform into a full-fledged combat tool. But perhaps even more important is its autonomy. The submarine can be controlled remotely from over 250 kilometers away, which effectively turns it into a next-generation sea drone capable of performing tasks without direct crew involvement.
It can take up to 11 people on board. The boat's crew can be as small as 3 people.
In parallel, Ukraine is making another bet on weapons that can change the balance not just at the tactical but at the strategic level. We are talking about domestic ballistics, a field that has long remained in the shadows but today is increasingly coming to the forefront.
We are talking about 2 major niches here. The first is so-called tactical ballistics with a range of up to 200 kilometers. And the second is effectively strategic ballistics with a range of up to 800 or 850 kilometers.
According to experts, Ukraine is already in the final stages of developing a whole range of ballistic solutions. This is not about a single project, but several directions at once with different teams working on them.
Specifically the so-called TRIM-type complex. There is information that it is also in the final stages of effectively testing. This means that Ukraine could receive a whole range of different ballistic missiles with ranges up to 500 kilometers, up to 850 kilometers, and so on. And this could become a significant strategic turning point.
Effectively, this means that not only frontline positions will be under threat, but also deep military facilities, warehouses, logistics hubs, and the infrastructure that supports the entire system of warfare. Russia is physically unable to cover its entire territory from such strikes, and therefore a vulnerability appears that did not exist before. And if underwater Ukraine relies on stealth and surprise, then in the sky it relies on range and the inevitability of the strike. Together, this forms a new model of war, where the decisive factor is not the amount of equipment, but the ability to find the enemy's weak spots and strike where they are not ready to defend. That's all from me. I'm Darina Hutskalo. More hellish news in our next episode. Well, for now, don't forget to subscribe and give us a like. See you.